I mean, the federal government continuously makes every indication that that rule is going to go into effect next year. I mean, as recently as last week, the EPA started the rulemaking process that says that any state that does not proceed with an implementation process, the federal government will come up with that rule for you and will dictate it to you. They started that last Monday, or they announced that last
Mr.
Monday.
Chairman, go ahead. If we decide to do, we don't want to do anything, we want to mess with it, they're going to do it for us.
Yes, but I will say this. Our argument continues to be on this topic is, first of all, Dominion's fleet, and again, this is a state responsibility. Dominion's fleet has been getting significantly cleaner over time anyways, as we retire what I'll call the heavy carbon emitting plants and repowering with natural gas. So it's not because we knew this rule was coming, it's just basically a transition of our fleet. Our comments to the EPA and others have been, we're not opposed to the policy. What we're opposed to and have concerns about is the fairness to the Virginia ratepayers, about how is it that states that are making the move to reduce their carbon footprint basically having much lower targets than states that haven't done anything. About Senator Saslaw's question a little bit ago, if I could expand my answer here, with all due respect. What we have modeled in West Virginia is if they figure out a way to get us to retire Mount Storm on the back of the Virginia ratepayers. Remember, that doesn't cost the West Virginia people a penny. If they figure out a way to get us to shutter that plant, and we think they will need to build one small natural gas unit, then they will be in compliance with their 2030 goal. So that's really, in my mind, small money for them. Now, I will say West Virginia has already filed suit against the EPA saying it's harmful to their economy, harmful to coal jobs, harmful to the railroads, everything else. West Virginia has already done that. We know several other states that have already taken that step. But our guidance to the members that we have talked to is Dominion has no choice but to plan for this rule and to assume that it is coming. But at the same time, we recommend what I'll call small steps while this whole thing works its way through the court system. Because there is no doubt there will be many challenges. It will go to the Supreme Court, no doubt. I just don't know under what time frame. So our recommendation to you to consider doing is do what you think, but we will have to continue to make some minor steps or some steps heading in the direction that this rule will be effective in the summer of 2015. We have no choice.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Thanks. Cody?
Just clarify one thing.
Absolutely.
The 880, it's 884 is the interim goal, and that represents the average that has to be achieved for the 10-year period beginning in 2020. So the initial year, you don't necessarily have to hit 884. The EPA has actually developed what they call a glide path, where you can start out higher and glide down to the ultimate goal of 810. So the average you achieve is 884 during that first 10 years.
Cody, and I understand that the EPA's goal is to reduce the amount of CO2 emissions across the board. And perhaps I'm asking a question you don't know the answer to, but did anybody look at saying, okay, we're going to, the average across the country is this, we're going to take it down to this level and achieve the goal that way, as opposed to singling out individual states like Virginia and asking them to achieve a number that is going to be extremely expensive. Anything's achievable. The question is at what cost. And was there any rationale why the approach was taken by state as opposed to by nationwide, given the adverse impacts to Virginia as opposed to our neighboring states?
I'm certainly not an expert on how the EPA develops its regulations, so anything I would say would simply be speculation. So I'd rather not try to answer that question.
Any other questions? Thanks so much for coming, Cody. I do appreciate it.
Opportunity to talk to the committee about how we think this rule will impact our businesses here in Virginia. Those of you who don't know us, Westvaco is a global manufacturer, packaging company. have significant manufacturing operations in the western part of the state, in Allegheny Highlands, for pulp and paper. I'd like to start off with just giving you a little bit of background. I noticed you got the handouts that we have, just the notes that I'm speaking from. Just like to point out the stats in Virginia right now. According to the EQ's numbers and the comments that they filed, Virginia has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions 39% since 2005. That's a testament largely to market forces, as we heard through the menu, also voluntary initiatives, and just natural things that happen in the industry. With Midwest Waco specifically, we've shut down a couple of our older boilers. We started a new biomass unit in 2013. That's resulted in about 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from our plant that are not included in the EQ's estimates. So we're after the time frame that we're looking at. Energy is obviously a critical part to our manufacturing operations, both from electricity and from fuel. So I'll talk to some of the remarks that we have and how that impacts us specifically. As was pointed out, legally, we do have concerns about how these standards would actually get implemented and whether or not they'll survive a challenge. We won't speak to that today, but I will like to add that our industry in particular is a sector that is looked at for additional regulation after these standards are finalized. So EPA stated that they will go after utilities in this sense. Obviously, it translates into demand side uses, energy production, energy efficiency there. But there will be specific targets for industry groups later on. So we're looking at that as well in our plan. Inequity, that was talked about a good bit with the last speaker, so I won't speak much to that, but you can see the targets that other neighboring states have. That is a concern to us as manufacturers as well. I'd like to spend the bulk of my time talking about the flexibility and the building blocks that EPA has set out and how that impacts our business. EPA states that there are a lot of flexibility offered in the rule. This flexibility is basically in the structure that they have with the 4 building blocks. They say that if there are shortfalls in one building block, states have the ability to move additional reductions into other building blocks. We don't necessarily believe that that's as possible or as achievable as the EQ or as EPA indicates that it is. With respect to building block 1 specifically, EPA is requiring in-fence line reductions of about 6% system-wide from the utilities themselves. Obviously, the utilities can speak to that. We're not sure that that's actually achievable, so our concern would be what reductions they can't achieve within the fence line would get translated into additional reductions required from the other building blocks. Building blocks 2 and 3 and 4 have the biggest impact that we see for our businesses. Building block 2 requires additional dispatch of natural gas for electricity production. Concerns that we have with that are fourfold. First, that will increase electricity costs. That will increase natural gas costs, which is definitely a raw material that we need for our energy needs, not only for electrical production, but also process use. And in both instances, we think that there's serious concerns about reliability for electricity and natural gas availability, and how that impacts our businesses directly. What that means to us is even small reductions in energy or reliability from an electrical standpoint, that has significant impact on our business. Momentary blips in electricity can trip out operating equipment. Those require several hours of lost manufacturing to achieve normal operation and get back into stable operation.
Dick, I just want to stop you right there.
Absolutely.
While I got all these folks in here right now. You mentioned that the availability of natural gas, and this one concerns me because clearly, whatever form or fashion these regulations take in final form, it's going to require an increased reliance on natural gas as a generating unit. I got a kind of a very concerning call from the gas provider for the Hampton Roads area saying that this recent cold snap that we had 2 weeks ago, every valve they had open was wide open to Virginia to provide natural gas as a heating source for homes. And then had they not built the underground or under the Hampton Roads body of water pipeline, Hampton Roads would have been out of natural gas in terms of trying to keep people warm. My concern is this: if we're going to put an increased load on natural gas as an electric generation, under these proposals. Clearly, that's going to happen. We just heard that there's 3,500 megawatts of power that got to come off, and it's got to be replaced with something. And a nuclear plant that being proposed is 1,200, perhaps 1,200 megawatts of that proposed 3,500. The balance is going to have to be made up by additional natural gas. If we don't have the existing infrastructure in the state to accommodate the current demand, clearly we're going to need a larger source of natural gas or additional pipeline infrastructure to be able to support that. Is there someone here that can talk to that at all about that? I mean, I just see a big need for additional pipeline infrastructure if we're going to be able to support the demand being placed on natural gas for electric generation. If we already reached capacity here a week ago, and one would anticipate that just through population growth alone, we're going to have additional demand on the existing natural gas infrastructure. Is there anyone from the gas industry? We'll take a look at that later on as we work our way through the session, but your concerns are...
Yeah, I can't speak to your specific questions related to Virginia. I can relate to a couple of things that happened to us specifically last year, particularly in our Virginia plant and also in our Alabama plant, because natural gas did get to be a concern during the very cold periods of the winter. We did have curtailments due to availability of natural gas, both on the power, on the electricity side, and on the natural gas supply side. So we got a double whammy where we had impacts both on our ability to consume electricity and on our ability to use natural gas for our local processes.
Thank you. If you want to continue on, thanks.
Sure. So as these rules get implemented, we do see those concerns being highlighted, both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a availability standpoint. We're estimating about a 30% increase in natural gas cost to our systems as a result of these rules. And again, we just can't overstate the impact that any momentary blips or changes in electricity reliability has to our processes. Because again, it can take several hours for us to restore normal operation. Moving on to building block 3, this is it addresses alternative energy sources, zero emitting or lower emitting units. This is where you get into wind, solar, and nuclear. Specifically within our business, biomass is an issue. Biomass traditionally is considered neutral with respect to carbon. In the rule itself, EPA is very, very quiet on how they deal with that. They have since released their accounting framework, which allows states to consider those biomass emissions as neutral. We do have concerns as that translates into additional use of the resource, availability of wood supplies for an energy standpoint and for manufacturing purposes. We are definitely in favor of the highest best use of those raw materials. Building block 4 is where we see the biggest impact to the way we conduct our businesses. This is the demand side requirement to increase energy efficiency by 1.5% per year over a 10-year period. EPA based this goal on the best performer in a 1-year period. And translated that to say that everybody can do that for 10 years. We're not sure that that's even possible. If it is, it will definitely change the way we spend our capital resources. Energy efficiency is something that we invest in routinely anyway, but it requires to shift our capital spending from things that might make our businesses more competitive, allow us to compete more on a global marketplace, or invest in other infrastructure things for our businesses in favor of energy efficiency, which may or may not have the same payback or could have different economic impacts to our businesses. So that definitely changes the way that we would look at what resources we have and how we can spend those resources. In summary, we do see significant increases in electricity costs and natural gas costs.